Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I've been finishing up some summer classes as of late, and one of the things that's been keeping me sane while studying is having some background noise videos like icebergs. So today I'll be trying my hand at one. Let me know how it turns out in the comments, and without further ado, let's hop into the first half of this ancient Egyptian iceberg. To those of you who don't know how icebergs work, it's a chart where the top is well-known information about the topic, and the deeper you go, the crazier the information gets. Take a look at the screen as this scrolls past, and we'll get started on the first layer. Layer 1. Cleopatra and Caesar. This entry could mean a ton of different things, so I will just sum up their history and a few interesting things about them. Caesar was a well-known historical figure of Rome, who transformed the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was the queen of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. They first met during Rome's civil war, where Caesar had chased a rival, Pompey, to Egypt. There, Pompey was executed, and Caesar was held to help out Egypt's own civil war, where he sided with Cleopatra, who then won. From this time forward, they had relations, despite Caesar having a wife at home, Calpurnia. While Caesar and his wife Calpurnia never had a child, Caesar and Cleopatra presumably did. Caesarion, who was never officially recognized by Caesar himself, was stated by Cleopatra to be their child. With this history out of the way, here are two interesting facts about her. First, she was actually in Rome with Caesarion during the time of Julius Caesar's assassination. And finally, she was not actually Egyptian, and her genealogy actually goes back to one of Alexander the Great's generals. Exodus. The Exodus is the story of how the Jews fled from Egypt as told from the Abrahamic religions. The story starts with Moses being commanded by God through a burning bush to go to Egypt. There, he was to free the Hebrew slaves and bring them to Canaan. Arriving in Egypt, the Pharaoh refuses to let them leave, and this event starts the 10 plagues, one for each time the Pharaoh refuses, with the final plague being the death of all firstborn sons and calves. With this finale, the Hebrews are finally released, only to be chased to the Red Sea, where Moses parts it in half. Modern historical scholarship is split on whether this founding story has some or no historical basis. However, an interesting thing to note is there are some parallel narratives written during Alexander the Great's time about something similar happening, although with no mention of Hebrews. These range from Egypt blaming plagues on foreigners and kicking them out, to lepers and impure people wreaking havoc until they get forced out. King Tut. Excuse the pronunciation, but King Tutankhamun, hereon referred to as King Tut, was the last of his line to rule during the 18th dynasty. He is primarily known for how well preserved his tomb was, and how well-traveled artifacts from his tomb became, having exhibits in many different places. Another interesting thing that came from his tomb's discovery was the idea of a pharaoh's curse. This was believed to be caused by disturbing a burial site, and several people have supposedly died to it. The excavation's financier was the first, having torn open a mosquito bite while shaving and dying of blood poisoning shortly after. This happened a few months after opening, but only a few weeks after media reported about the curse, causing an uproar of curiosity into the subject. There are several counts for how many deaths this curse supposedly caused, but 9 seems to be the most all-encompassing. Ancient aliens. This topic is so large, it has a 13-season, 164-episode show on the History Channel, and I'm sure we've all heard of it or similar programs. So, to turn a 200-plus hour documentary series into a few sentences, this idea first came from The Chariot of the Gods, a book written by Erich von Däniken. The premise of this theory is that some ancient buildings and artifacts seem to be more sophisticated than we assume they had the ability to make. One case specific to Egypt is the accuracy with which the pyramids were built, and the Egyptians' ability to build it at all. The pyramids at Giza are, for example, aligned north to south with an accuracy of up to 0.05 degrees. Thus, the book explains that we had extraterrestrial visitors come and teach us things in order to create these ancient wonders. This conclusion was reached because of ancient artwork depicting what some believe to be aliens or vehicles, with several cultures having some form or another of similar artwork. The book also suggests several world religions were made because of contacts we have made in the past with these aliens. Ramses the Great. Ramses II, otherwise known as Ramses the Great, was the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty in Egypt. He was known as one of the greatest Egyptian pharaohs to ever live, and ruled Egypt during its most powerful period. Some of his achievements were restoring previously lost territory to Egypt, bringing peace to his country, and building several monuments across the Egyptian empire. He is also one of several pharaohs believed to have been ruling during the Exodus mentioned earlier. However, this is unconfirmed. Layer 2. King Tut's meteorite dagger. One of the artifacts that was found in the tomb of King Tut was an iron dagger. During the time of his reign, iron was extremely rare and considered to be more valuable than gold. Upon closer inspection of this dagger, using technology to analyze the blade's material composition, it was found that the blade was 11% nickel and 0.6% cobalt. Historically, iron never exceeds a composition of 4% until the 19th century. Iron meteorites, however, contain nickel content of 5 to 35%. This, along with the cobalt in the dagger, leads scientists to believe that the dagger itself was formed from a meteorite deposit. DB-320. Otherwise known as the Royal Cache, or TT-320, this is a tomb which contains numerous mummified remains and funeral equipment for more than 50 royal family members. 11 pharaohs were found from the 17th to 20th century. This was one of the larger finds of such equipment and remains. Hundreds of pyramids. This entry is vague, but I believe this refers to the number of pyramids that we have found and how many there could possibly be. In 1842, we knew of 67, and now we have discovered at least 118. One of the issues with finding them is the desert has been known to bury them rather frequently. And if the pyramids are in ruins, it makes it far easier for them to become buried and unidentifiable. So theoretically, there could be 100 of pyramids we have yet to discover, as they are buried or destroyed. Battle of Megiddo. The Battle of Megiddo was fought under the command of Pharaoh Thutmose III. The importance of this battle is because it is the first battle to have been recorded with reliable detail. It was also the first use of the composite bow and the first battle to have a body count attributed to it. We was Kangs. This phrase is a derogatory and discriminatory statement made towards people with African heritage, who state that themselves and others with African heritage are descendants of Egyptians, Moors, and Arabs. The phrase originated on Pol, a 4chan board, as a way to mock people with this belief. However, the 25th dynasty, otherwise known as the Nubian dynasty or the Black Pharaohs, were from what is present-day Sudan. Layer 3. Rogue obelisks. Unfortunately, I cannot really find anything about the subject. My best guess is that it could either be referencing how, of the less than 30 obelisks that still exist from ancient times, Egypt has about 5, with Rome having around 13. The other possibility is that it is referencing how many of the obelisks still around were smuggled out of Egypt during the Roman Empire and French campaign. Zenanza Incident. The Zenanza Incident refers to a Hittite prince named Zenanza, who was sent from the Hittites to the Egyptians to become the new husband of the then-widowed Egyptian queen. On his way there, he somehow died, and as such the Hittites attacked Egypt. The Hittites brought back prisoners who were sick, who caused an epidemic. Diary of Merer. The Diary of Merer is the name given to a papyrus logbook written over 4,500 years ago. It is the oldest papyri with text, and dates back to the pharaoh Khufu during the 4th dynasty. The contents of the diary list the daily activities of Merer and his crew, and documents the transportation of limestone from Tura to Giza by boat. Manetho. Manetho is believed to have been an Egyptian priest, but is the author of the Egyptiaca, or History of Egypt in Greek. Despite being a native Egyptian, his work was written exclusively in the Greek language. The Egyptiaca was a chronologically divided history of Egypt, separated by dynasties, which was a new idea at the time in how to divide the ruling periods. What has been recovered of this account has been relied upon by Egyptologists as a source for the lines of the royal families. The 3 volumes included starts from the deities and demigods and ends at the 31st dynasty. The way dynasties were divided, however, was not by bloodlines, but rather discontinuities of any kind, such as geographical or genealogical. Ma'at. Ma'at was the Egyptian idea of truth, balance, law, harmony, and basically everything related to order. It also referred to the goddess by the same name, who is the personification of these concepts. In Egyptian myth, her feather was weighed against your heart after death to judge if you maintained balance in your earthly life. Not much information exists about the goddess, however there are several remaining passages about what it means to follow the idea of Ma'at. Minoan fresco at Avaris. The Minoan fresco at Tel el-Dab'a is dated around the 18th dynasty of Egypt, during the decline of the Minoan civilization. The fresco's importance lies in the location and lack of information regarding it. The paintings seem to reveal that the location of Tel el-Dab'a was one where cultural exchanges took place, which means the city served an important function to the Egyptians. The painting itself depicts several things, such as a Minoan royal emblem and a female in a skirt, which may point towards a political marriage or an affair between an Egyptian and Minoan royal family member. Apart from that, there are some concerns about if the painter themselves is one of Minoan or Egyptian ancestry, and if Egyptian, how they learned the technique and skills. Nectanebo II was Alexander. This theory was rather difficult to find information about, and what I found may be different to what was originally intended to be learned from the headline, but what I did find is as follows. And get ready, it's a wild ride. When Alexander the Great died, his body made its way to Alexandria, Egypt. At this location, a tomb was built for Alexander, and many famous Roman emperors and Cleopatra came to give respects to his grave. However, the location of Alexander's tomb dries up just before the Roman Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the official religion and banned worship of other faiths. During this time, references to a tomb dedicated to Saint Mark come up, where its contents were later stolen by Venetian merchants. A man named Andrew Chugg in modern times came up with a theory that Saint Mark and Alexander's tomb were actually the same, and went to examine the tomb. First, the tomb has symbols associated with Macedonia and Alexander's family dynasty. Secondly, the tomb itself was actually an encased sarcophagus originally made for Nectanebo II that was left unused when he fled from Egypt. Therefore, the belief that the body recovered could be either Alexander or Nectanebo, as well as St. Mark's tomb actually being Alexander's or Nectanebo. Israel stele. The Israel stele, otherwise known as the Merneptah stele, was an inscription by the pharaoh Merneptah about his victory over the ancient Libyans, with the last 3 lines talking about a separate campaign in Canaan. Canaan was the holy land of the Hebrews stated in the Exodus in Layer 1. The importance of this fact is that it contains the first reference to Israel, and the only reference to come from ancient Egypt. There are only 3 other steles from other countries that do mention Israel. Ginger. Ginger was the name of one of 6 naturally mummified bodies found during an excavation in Egypt. His namesake refers to the color of his hair. However, this nickname is no longer used in museums due to ethical treatment policies. Similarly to Otzi the Iceman, it was discovered that Ginger was murdered, with a puncture found underneath his left shoulder blade, and lack of defensive wounds leads researchers to believe he was taken by surprise. The Great's father. For some baseline information, Nectanebo II was a pharaoh of Egypt, and is most known for being the last native Egyptian ruler. Essentially, according to the pseudo-historical Alexander romance, upon Nectanebo II's defeat, instead of fleeing to Nubia as was recorded, he instead fled to Macedonia under disguise, where he slept with the ruler of Macedonia's wife, and they had Alexander the Great. One belief for why this story was made was because of the above-mentioned sarcophagus he borrowed, and Egyptians' strong dislike for foreign rule and love of continuity in royal family lines. This story, him removing Persian rulers from Egypt, and an oracle who said he was of deific origin, helped to legitimize his rule for Egyptians. Layer 4. Tanis Royal Tombs. Popularized by the Indiana Jones movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, Tanis was one of the capitals of ancient Egypt. At this location, a team found a royal necropolis for the 21st and 22nd dynasty pharaohs. Found there were enormous amounts of artifacts and treasures, a solid silver coffin, and funerary cups made from gold, silver, and electrum. Menes debate. Menes was a pharaoh who has been credited by Manetho, the writer listed in Layer 3, for having united the upper and lower portions of Egypt together, and as the founder of the first Egyptian dynasty. Where the debate lies is in his identity. Besides Manetho, there is complete absence of any mention of a man named Menes. The two main theories regarding who Menes is attribute the name towards either Narmer or Hor-Aha, being the first and second pharaohs of the first dynasty. Several pieces of evidence have been found to support both theories, but as it stands, his identity is unknown. Depressed Ramses. Unfortunately, I could not find any information even mentioning something similar, so instead I found something about depression in ancient Egypt. Apparently, depression was considered an illness of the heart, and if the heart is ill, then the mental state is affected. There also exists pessimistic literature, where the authors of the work give detailed feelings on the state of Egypt. Within these works, they express vivid negative emotions such as hopelessness, despair, grief, and symptoms of depression. Ben Stone. The Ben Stone, also named the Pyramidon, was named after the Egyptian creation myth, where a mound rose from the primordial waters and the god Atum settled. The stone was located in the Temple of Ra, and was the prototype for other capstones of obelisks and pyramids. KV-35. KV-35 was the tomb of Amenhotep II, located in the Valley of the Kings, and later became a cache for other royals. The importance of this tomb is the layout, with a divided upper and lower section, which became standard for later burials in the New Kingdom. el-Ka'ab. This location was a site of worship and burial in ancient Egypt, with the modern name meaning the Mother of Pots, as the location is littered with broken pots and offerings. The area was used as the burial grounds for the first dynasty and ruling elites, with many tombs being strewn across this location. The tombs here were some of the first to be attributed to ancient Egypt. This location was also a part of ritual human sacrifice, which will be talked about later. Esmet Akom. The graffito of Esmet Akom is the last known inscription written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Carved into the Temple of Philae slightly after the time of the Roman Emperor Theodosius, whom closed all pagan temples, it just so happened to sit slightly outside the Roman Empire and was not closed. By the time of the carving, the Christianization of Egypt meant it was possible that belief in Egyptian gods didn't extend out of the temple priest's immediate family, or anyone left who could read hieroglyphs. The inscription itself was a figure of the god Mandulus, with text that states the inscriptor wishes for his inscription to last for all of time and eternity. Nakada 1-3. Nakada 1-3 were three separate sub-periods of culture that happened in order, all predating Egypt as a state. Nakada 1 refers to the Amoratian, 2 is the Gurze, and 3 is the Sumerian. These periods all have separate markers of accomplishments, with 1 having painted pottery, 2 having metalworking, and 3 being the creation of pharaohs in written language. Daughter incest. Pretty much what you see on the tin. Essentially, interfamily relations of all kinds were common in royal families, specifically pharaohs. Among other things were the idea of a family pedigree, keeping and not diluting royal blood. Along with this, women generally do not marry below their spot on the hierarchy, and if you were not at the top, you had few options. Amasis flatulence. The fart that started a revolution. The pharaoh Apries had just sent troops to help out Libya against a Greek invasion, and it went very poorly, with Egyptian unrest mounting at the deaths. Apries held off on doing anything until it became too much to ignore, where he sent one of his best generals, Amasis, to help quell the uprising. When he arrived to speak, an insurgent placed a helmet on Amasis' head and asked Amasis to be their king instead. Deciding to roll with the punches, Amasis decided to join the insurgents' company. Hearing of the turncoat, Apries sent a messenger to demand Amasis turn himself in. Amasis responded by lifting his butt, farting, and telling the messenger to send that back to the pharaoh. Upon receiving the news, Apries had the messenger's ears and nose cut off as punishment. This act angered many civilians who were on Apries' side, and eventually the pharaoh Apries was killed and the role of pharaoh was given to Amasis. Obama is Akhenaten. Let me do my best to sum this up.
His name is Car, and his name is written hieroglyphic as Car, and actually...
That looks like me. Look at those ears.
And he was the overseer of the pyramid city of Cheops.
Lost capitals. Over the course of its history, Egypt has had 20 or so capitals, with a few being considered as lost, such as Thinis, the first capital of Egypt, and It-Shawi, with both having historical records but no exact location. Human sacrifice. Ancient Egypt would have servants killed during the first dynasty to serve the pharaohs in the afterlife. Later on this changed, and Shabtis were created to take the place of human sacrifice. For the servants sacrificed, it was believed to have been a way to raise their social status and wealth in the afterlife, along with giving them a sure way to reach eternal life. Alright, and congrats for reaching the first end of this two-part journey into the ancient Egyptian iceberg. I hope you all enjoyed what we were able to discover here, and now is the part where I ask for some channel guidance on what you guys like and dislike about this video. I'm still working some things out, such as writing style and the amount of detail into each topic, and just overall quality. So for those of you who want to, I have a quick 4-question survey down in the description to better assess what I need to work on and what you guys enjoy. If you would prefer to just drop a comment below, that works too. However, thank you for your time and the help, and I hope to see you all again when the next part of the video comes out. Take care, everyone.